Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now on our 11th episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast. Well, the past few weeks, or maybe I should say months, have been very active in DC. We've been busy working with the 111th Congress and the new administration on accelerating building out our nation's critical broadband infrastructure. Today, I'll be at Connected America at the conference in Dallas, speaking on a keynote panel with executives from AT&T, Nextlink, Comcast, and will be moderated by the Wall Street Journal on Fiber for All. So that should be a pretty interesting discussion. Our next regional Fiber Connect workshop is coming up on March 25th in Philadelphia. This regional event will definitely sell out, so please don't wait to register. The day after the Philly event, our Public Policy Committee will be heading down to Harrisburg to meet with the state legislature, so please join us for that. So after Philadelphia, we have our Fiber Day in the Hill on April 9th. That'll be in the Rayburn building on the House side. And then in June 1st to 4th, we'll have our large annual conference, Fiber Connect 2025 in Nashville. So June 1st to 4th, not going to want to miss that. Then we'll be up in Anchorage in July, Toronto in August, Spokane in September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and we'll wrap the year up with our premier member meeting in Palm Springs, December 8th and 9th. That brings us to today's Fiber for Breakfast session with Eric Bathras, the Chief Technology Officer for the Infrastructure Maryland Department of Information Technology, to discuss State of Maryland Bridges Digital Divide with New Digital Infrastructure Group, or DIG. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you to everybody who's joining us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, please keep in mind, all participants are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located in the control panel in the upper right side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's presentation. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on the FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours, and you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do so. We appreciate your input. With that, I will hand things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was Rusty Williams, the President and CEO of UTC, who discussed working together for the betterment of the communications industry. Rusty's members are IOUs, municipalities, and co-ops who provide electric, water, and/or gas to the communities they serve. With the advent of artificial intelligence and electric vehicles and the threat of cyber attacks, the environment is quite dynamic for utility operators. The one common thread is the need for broadband and fiber. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Eric Bathras, the Chief Technical Officer for Infrastructure, Maryland Department of Information Technology, discuss the State of Maryland Bridges Digital Divide with New Digital Infrastructure Group, DIG. So Eric is the Chief Technology Officer of DoIT. I love the acronyms. Acronyms. So Department of Information Technology, so DoIT. He brings over 30 years of broadband networks, experience of broadband networks across public and private sectors. In his role, he leads the critical state infrastructure programs, including Network Maryland, Maryland MD First, Cloud and Data Center Services, and DoIT infrastructure agreements. So prior to rejoining DoIT, Eric served as the global broadband leader at AECOM, where he led broadband and smart cities initiatives on local, national, and international levels. His career is marked by leading cross-functional teams and delivering complex technology products. Notable achievements include serving the IoT and broadband connectivity architecture for San Mateo County's Smartest Street in America project, chairing the Digital Infrastructure Group, or DIG, for the state of Maryland, and leading the evaluation of global subsea cable landing stations for major tech companies. A thought leader in his field, Eric's authored numerous broadband readiness plans and delivered keynote addresses at national events, including Broadband Nation Expo, the Wharton School of Business, and Bixie's National Conference. With all that, welcome, Eric. And for audience, please type your questions as we go, and we'll work those in discussion. So maybe to kick things off, and let's start with, can you just give us an overview of Maryland's broadband infrastructure across the state? How much fiber, and kind of what you're looking at for expansion plans?
Yeah, sure. So Maryland is actually pretty far ahead on the fiber infrastructure side. So as part of that, Network Maryland, which is what I oversee, it's a public sector service provider network. We have about 600 fiber miles in terms of state ownership with DoIT. But we also have, between MOUs and resource share agreements, roughly 3,000 fiber miles across the state that we utilize to deliver services for public sector entities across the state, whether it's schools, county schools, whether it's state agencies, governor's office, you name it. We're delivering internet or virtual private routed network services out across the state. And then we're unique also in a way where we own our own public safety radio system network called Maryland First. And we have towers, probably close to 200 towers across the state that are state owned that leverage this Maryland First system, and also leverage the fiber for backhaul purposes on Network Maryland.
So, so safety networks, 200 towers connect with fiber. What about just public safety? And is that more municipality? Would be connecting light poles and everything, cameras and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we connect everything from CAIs to IoT devices, you name it. We partner up with MDOT. So MDOT and DoIT utilize shared infrastructure at times, and then MDOT may utilize our infrastructure at times to get to certain corridors or certain facilities that they need to get to. So we serve about 130 public sector customers, and we have about 950, close to 1,000 CAIs that we connect all over the state, again, between local and state agencies.
So the Maryland's going to be, was allocated 268 million in BEAD funding for a little under 25,000 unserved and a little under 15,000 underserved locations. How does that fit into what you're working on?
Yeah, so one of the things that I did in a prior life when I worked, when I was with AECOM, go out and work with different state and county governments and trying to work with them to understand what is their current state, what is their desired state. And one of the things that I always kept coming back to was creating a single view of assets across the state, and be able to do that, especially from the public sector, to be able to serve CAIs, and also to be able to not only use that infrastructure for the public use, but also to get closer to homes and businesses. So what DIG's going to do is bring together public sector agencies and entities, being led by DoIT. It's about 10 state agencies. And what we're going to end up doing is create what I call the Maryland single view. And it's going to have the public assets that will be accessible for these public sector entities, so we can take more of a proactive posture in planning, designing, and deploying jointly across the state. And what's important about that is not only will that optimize funding from an internal perspective, right, from state funding, but also provide the opportunities to identify what are some of the towers we can get to, and then also blending in what are some of the and underserved communities that could leverage either dark fiber that we have, right, and we can utilize like a resource share agreement or MOU between the private sector, but also get to these towers where there can be a fixed wireless solution, a cellular solution, you name it, coming off of those towers to get to these and underserved communities from homes and businesses. So for Network Maryland and DoIT, again, we are a public sector service provider network. We serve public agencies and county schools and local governments. But what we're doing is being able to leverage the expansion of the public infrastructure to be able to also have other private entities leverage that and get them closer to make their business model more achievable to be able to get to un and underserved locations by utilizing this public infrastructure.
All right. So can you tell me structurally how this works? So uh, you guys, so your broadband department, where do you roll up and how does it fit with the other agencies? And you're a direct report into the governor, or where do you fit in this?
Yeah, so DoIT is its own agency,
Right.
and we're separate from DHCD, which is the Office of State Broadband. So we have within DoIT is Network Maryland, and the way we fit in is we provide these services out to all of these agencies and these CAIs. And also, when it comes to like BEAD, for instance, we would actually be an applicant into DHCD potentially, right, for CAI connectivity. So that's how we would plug into DHCD, is we would be an applicant essentially. Now, what again for DIG, there's a couple of different pieces that are important about DIG. One is the single view,
Right.
and being able to create that single view. You know, we are borrowing a little bit from the private sector like fiber locator and geotel, right? But we're going to create a public sector version of that for public sector entities so they can see what's out there. The other piece that's important is from a DIG perspective is being able to get fiber out to these areas jointly. We can optimize funding, but also get to towers. And when we're able to get fiber to towers, there's an opportunity to bring in commercial service providers like mobile service providers, your typical carriers, and even wireless internet service providers to be able to get to those towers. And when they get to those towers, we have an RSA program where we actually generate revenue for the state. So the more towers we can get to, we can leverage those towers to generate revenue to the state to be able to then feed back into, Network Maryland, DoIT, DIG, where we can now utilize those funds to build out in more and more areas. I'm a firm believer in when broadband is being expanded out and planned to be built out, it should be based on four key areas. One is wireless. Layer, I call them layers. Layer one is wireless. Layer two is transportation. Layer three is government institutions, and layer four is community needs, right? So the un and underserved homes and businesses, and the ability to be able to in one build essentially, or one area, one corridor is to be able to build in one of those areas where you can satisfy those four needs. Those are like the sweet spots, right? Those are like the golden corridors, or what I call Goldilocks corridors, right? That's really the sweet spot to really optimize the funding and investment that goes into those builds to be able to satisfy the most needs that are out there from those for those four different layers, right? So wireless meaning towers, IoT devices, transportation, and the smart corridors, CAIs from a government institution standpoint, and then from a community need, we're looking at un and underserved homes and businesses. And being able to layer that in and plan out how we're going to do that and attack that, where you can really optimize where we're going to go, how we're going to go, and why we're going to go.
All right. So when when Governor Moore was creating this executive order to create DIG, this
Mm-hmm.
was something that you and Katie Savage had dreamed up to, and that was really to kind of coordinate all the state's IT assets to make sure that you're in position to be able to hit these four key priorities.
Yeah, so when I was brought on, one of the things that I was tasked with was, is writing the DoIT at least, first broadband expansion plan. And within that plan is where I came up with the concept of the digital infrastructure group, DIG, right? And when I ended up authoring that and highlighting some of the key components of the single view RSA revenue and then these Goldilocks corridors, meeting with the secretary and said, okay, look, how do we truly at a statewide level, how can we do this in a very practical way? So we're organizing as a state. So MDOT is not going alone. DoIT's not going alone, right, and spending dollars, and MDOT's not spending dollars on their own. So we can bring in all of the main, let's call it wired and wireless communication builders out in the state from a public sector standpoint. Let's bring us all together under one group, come together, identify, what are everybody's initiatives, where are the needs, what are we trying to accomplish, and then also be able to leverage that single view so they can see ahead of time in a proactive manner. A lot of times when fiber is being built, an agency goes alone, they build it, they spend the money, and they serve their individual need, right? What we're going to do is we are going to have the opportunity at least to be able to provide awareness and coordination out to these other agencies and vice versa, them to us, seeing where DoIT's fiber is, seeing where MDOT's fiber is, seeing where MDTA's fiber is. So when they have a need in an area or an initiative that's going to cover a certain part of the state, they can look back, they can look into the single view and say, what assets do we have here? So think of like Department of General Services, right? They lease all the real estate and have office buildings across the state. Well, they can go into this single view and say, where's the nearest, state fiber? Because if we can, look at real estate in close proximity to like a new headquarters, well, that's going to make sense, the most sense for the state. And not only from a DGS standpoint, right, from a real estate, but if there's a corridor in that goes, by or near that area, then maybe there's some transportation needs. If there's a CAI in that area, we may be able to pick up a school, another government building, and then is there a tower in the area? So off of one build, we can satisfy multiple needs that really fulfill our obligations to the citizens, where we are investing one time to be able to, what I call like sweat out as much value as you can from that one investment in the ground.
So your coordination with MDOT, do you get any advantages? Like, your single view is more with IT infrastructure, but as they're doing roadway construction, dig once, it seems like if you're collaborating with MDOT, that you'd be able to minimize your costs by being able to, get your conduit all in to where they're doing roadway construction and be able to get it all done as part of one build versus having to come back later.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting you bring up that, right? So MDOT has, for instance, an ad schedule for construction, right? Could be parts of new roadways, modifications of roadways. So what we're doing is also we're putting in where MDOT may have these additions, right? This ad schedule. We'll put that in the single view. We'll also put in other elements like congested corridors and so forth. So again, there's an opportunity where MDOT and DoIT can come together and be able to share in the costs, right? Share in the costs of those builds. So what may have cost them 100% in the past, if they're able to bring DoIT in and another agency, we've already, if it's three agencies, we've already cut our costs, dramatically to be able to do that. So it's no different from what you're talking about in terms of an ad schedule. So the challenge in the past has been it's all very reactive, right? It's all been very reactive.
Right.
Hey, we already built here, right? And then they come back and, someone says, hey, I need to go that same spot. And we're like, well, do you have fiber or, conduit available, whatever it may be? Well, that's what we want to do is we want to really be on the very front end from a planning, awareness, and coordination. So we're really not having those conversations anymore. Those conversations become obsolete. And we are now, when we're building out broadband from a public sector perspective, we're going to do that on the front end, bring awareness, bring coordination, understand, what we can do together versus going it alone. And then also, we're always asking ourselves now, what's our wireless look like in that area? What are our transportation needs? What are our CAI needs? What are our un and underserved community needs? And taking those into account. So if we have an underserved area, we know if there's a tower in the area in a very rural area, well, there's value in it to get to that tower and build to it, and then reach out to our RSA partners or MOU partners or commercial service providers and say, hey, look, we're at this tower. Would you guys like to come on to this tower? You can provide fixed wireless out. You can provide some sort of last mile out to the end user. But also, if we have fiber that's deeper into the community because we're serving CAIs, we can improve their business model where they can come in and leverage, and we can do a fiber swap and give them some fiber, where their business model becomes much more, positive to be able to get to, several homes.
Yeah, I have to think this would also be of high value to emergency services. When you provide a
Yes.
lot, yeah. Anything
Yeah,
you can
we
say?
provide. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I mean, because when you look at the poor police officers, they are sitting in the parking lots of libraries or schools or anywhere they can get Wi-Fi access, and just anytime there's any kind of emergency event, communication is key. And so by coordination between these state entities and having good public sector communications infrastructure, I would have to think that would vastly improve emergency services.
Absolutely. One of the items I mentioned earlier was Maryland First, right? So Maryland
Yeah.
First is an interoperable public safety radio system. So there's countless counties, municipalities that their public safety, police, fire utilize Maryland First. So again, it's very important for Network Maryland to get to these towers. We put up our Maryland First antennas on those. So again, from a public safety standpoint, they can have service in areas that they may never have had before. And that's one of the things that we're looking at from a dig perspective is, where do we need to get to from a gap in coverage standpoint, and then be able to serve public safety in those areas. We had when I presented this back in November at our public safety public sector broadband summit. One of the counties was talking about there's really just an area of roadway when you ride on it that there just is no cell service. There's no service at all, right? So like for us, we'll throw that in dig, and that's what we want to highlight, right? We want to highlight these areas, whether they be gaps in coverage or other areas that are congested corridors or on and underserved areas. So we can paint targets all around the state, overlay where we have assets, and then as a group, we figure out, hey, where we're going to go and how we're going to go.
So AI is the big thing of the moment, right? And it's just consuming massive amounts of energy, water, and fiber. Um, how does AI fit into your thinking? And is that a revenue opportunity for you guys?
Yeah. So for us on the AI front, we have Nishant Shah, who does a great job on our side, who runs the AI element out of DoIT, and they just released their AI plan for the state. So for us in DoIT, one of the things that we're looking to leverage AI is how we can plug in AI where we are pulling in all of this data, Gary, where we're pulling in fiber assets, tower assets, congested corridors, all of these data elements. And then as an output of that, be able to highlight, what are the areas that can bring the most benefit and the most cost optimization in terms of, projects or initiatives that would come out of that, right? So rather than going through this from, the old school ways of drawing lines on a map and seeing, how much is it going to cost, but really being able to put those targets on the map and have as an outcome to say, hey, these are this, AI, spitting out basically, these are your 3 top priorities for the state. This is where you should focus on because it can hit those 4 layers, right? And those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at further ahead as we develop the single view. It's not going to be in our beta version, right? But it will certainly be in a version down the line where we are integrating AI, where we can be much more optimized on where we're going, how we're going, costs, understanding costs, and plugging in some of those data elements so we can get to those areas faster.
Now, quantum networking, that's no stranger to Maryland. How is that fitting into DIG plans?
Yeah, so for us, one of the things that as part of my responsibility, so not only do I oversee Network Maryland and Maryland First, I also oversee our cloud and data center infrastructure as well. So for us, it's, we want to always make sure that we are understanding where those types of resources are going to be, and make sure we have high speed connectivity into those areas. Again, it's, from a data center, horsepower, quantum computing standpoint, we want to make sure we have direct peering relationships to all of those facilities. So in terms of how it plugs into DIG is, again, it's no different than a CAI that we need to connect, right? If there's a resource we should be connected to, whether it's through a partner like MD-REN, which is Maryland's Research and Education Network, if they have direct access or connectivity to that, well, then we want to make sure that we are directly peering or connected with MD-REN in those that scenario. So for us, we want to make sure we understand where those resources are going to be, and make sure we're planning ahead. And then also looking into the state, into our DIG partners, and understanding what are their needs as it relates to quantum computing, and be able to make sure that we are planning together on how we're going to connect to those resources.
So, obviously Governor Wes Moore was, you're sitting there looking at some big budget gaps and really looking at DIG as a way to drive efficiencies. So what are your key metrics? I mean, obviously you're going to be driving some revenue, but also from a cost and so forth. What are the things that you're reporting back on the success of DIG?
Yeah, so for us, in terms of measurements, success, and how we're going to quantify it is, again, on the RSA revenue side. So for instance, if we have 180 towers and we're on, we have RSAs on 20 of those, it's, one of our goal is, let's get 100% increase in terms of getting RSAs on additional towers. So instead of 20, we go to 40, right? And for every tower, there's a metric there in terms of what that revenue can generate for the state. So that's one measurement, right, from a RSA standpoint. The other piece of that is from a joint project standpoint. As I was referring to earlier, right, in the past, there's a lot of going alone, not only in Maryland, but also everywhere across the state when we're looking at public sector builds. Those things tend to happen in a silo. So, from from a measurement standpoint, we're looking to, if we can get 3, 4 projects out there and we have 2, 3, 4 agencies in, that's a huge success, because at that point, what it would cost to do it 100% in the past now costs us maybe 33% of that or 25% of that. So any types of joint projects with DoIT, with MDOT, with others is going to be a real quantitative success and measurement.
You know, the only thing you're missing is, like I was just with my friend Vineet talking about gumbo stuff in their acronyms for Louisiana. So you need something to do with crabs or terrapins or something, you know, in all your acronyms. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Claw.
Eric, thanks for the amazing things that you're doing in Maryland. We really appreciate single view and the consolidation and efficiency that you're building for broadband and connecting everybody. So thank you. And I hope that everybody can join us again next week. We'll be talking with our good friend Jeff Hainan, the Vice President of Broadband Access and Home Networking with Del Oro, to discuss his latest research on the 2025 fiber broadband forecast. So you're not going to want to miss that. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks again, Eric. See you.
Thank you. Bye.